Nomad Podcast.
So, hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today I have the wonderful Alex join me. And Alex, I normally start the episode with people introducing themselves and who they are and what they do and how did they get into Bitcoin. So, how did you get into Bitcoin, Alex?
Hey, Alice. First, thank you for having me. I'm Alex. Born and bred in Germany. Lived a couple of years in Spain. Currently, I'm back in Germany. But already want to go again. I am an economist by training, so I studied economics, and I also have a master's in finance. During my studies, I was big into Austrian economics. However, right after uni, I started a tech company. And then for a couple of years, more or less, I did not think much about economics or the world in general, because when you start a new company, usually you only work 18 hours a day and do nothing else. And then COVID gave me a little bit of time to think, right? Because the world slowed down. I was reading a lot more. Actually, first I found Bitcoin in 2017, but then I dismissed it because, as you know, like you cannot like read about it like 1 or 2 hours and then be like, oh, like this is the big invention that it actually is. So I dismissed it like a lot of other people. And then when I got really the time to get into it, I basically fell in love because it was more or less all of my Austrian economic fantasies, in one little thing. I basically read, I don't know, like hundreds of books. I mean, hundreds is maybe a little bit overestimated, but at least whatever, 50, 60, 70 books about, from like, again, economics, but from a different perspective, right? So this is when I got into it. Nowadays, I think that's actually the solution to most problems we face as humanity.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, always the same, like we got into it at one point, then we're like, nah, it's bullshit. And now later in COVID, all of us got into it because we had time, So it was also for me, I got into it in 2016 because my brother at that time was into it. And my brother tried to orange pill. And my brother tried to orange pill my mom, which was a bank, like an ex-banker and financer, So it was funny. Yeah. And for hardcore, really, like 2019, like the start of COVID, So that was fun. Okay, so Alex, topic of today will be MicroStrategy. And we kind of discussed this before we started this episode. Is MicroStrategy, so strategy B, what they're doing, is that the right way for example, as Bitcoiners, as a community, and generally for Bitcoin, because I like what he's doing. I like that he brings Bitcoin mainstream, but I think there are also some risks with that. And I always have the opinion that isn't he basically by buying more Bitcoin and using his company as a kind of like a security to buy more Bitcoin, isn't he increasing his steps? And that's what I would like to discuss with you today. So what are your thoughts on MicroStrategy and what he does in the Bitcoin space?
Cool. Let me get started by saying I'm also in the camp of these Bitcoiners who say if Bitcoiners will not get to a medium of exchange in the long term, then Bitcoin failed. Because at the end of the day, I think I love this, let's just say rebel spirit the Bitcoiners had, I would say, until 2 years ago or something, where basically pre-Trump, everybody was like, hey, let's overhaul the system. Let's elevate humanity to a new level and put states in their place, and let's privatize money. So this is also really my end goal with Bitcoin. And all of these people now saying, oh, Bitcoin is more like digital gold, like a store of value. We should not really use it as money. It is limited. States cannot control it, and so on and so on. But it's not really money. Let's not talk about payment solutions like Lightning and so on, because let's be honest, in the past 2 years, in all of the news outlets, nobody's talking about Lightning anymore, right? Personally, I hate it, because personally, I think Bitcoin is money, and it's just the best form of money out there. And I think the conversation moved in the past 2 years a lot more and more into like Bitcoin adoption. now like these treasury companies buying Bitcoin, but also like the ETFs, institutions coming in, and so everything gets professionalized. Yeah, and as most of us hold Bitcoin. Yeah. People are cheering from the side and be like, yeah, pump the price, yeah. So to make myself rich. But I think this, at the end of the day, this is just fiat thinking. Yeah, people just want to get rich quick. That's why they are rooting for these companies to basically buy Bitcoin and to push the price. Disclaimer: I want to say that also I'm a big investor in MicroStrategy. Yeah, so I long term I think that what they are doing is actually quite genius. Yeah. However, obviously, as you said, there are risks. So I want to like separate my answer in two points. Number one, is it good for Bitcoin? Yeah, and number two, what are more or less the risks? And then we can get into whatever you want. So first, I think, is it good for Bitcoin? I think overall, what I'm seeing in the past 24 months, I would say no. Why? Because I think the conversation moves into the wrong direction. The conversation should not be about, hey, how can we professionalize Bitcoin into the fiat system, but more like how can we tear the fiat system down, how can we develop technical solutions on Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is used as money. I think in Austria, there's one guy, I forgot his last name, but his first name is Hubertus. What he's doing is it's called Bit Credit. Yeah. So it's basically a protocol which allows Bitcoin to be a little bit more flexible. Yeah, because as you know, Bitcoin is hard capped, and usually, like if you have a hard capped currency, it's not like super practical. And he is developing a solution that we can also use Bitcoin as medium of exchange and basically enabling credit and loans, but on the Bitcoin protocol. And I think we have to think and talk about a lot more about these medium of exchange solutions, because eventually we want to privatize money. Yeah, so this is my goal, and hopefully like the goal of all of Bitcoiners, at least the Bitcoiners which I respect the most. Yeah, like if you are a person who holds Bitcoin for whatever 5-10 years because you understood, okay, it's a great way to make money, but eventually you want to sell it. Yeah, then I'm just like, no, sorry, like you need to hold it, until it reaches its potential, and then you can spend it. Yeah, sure, but we need to talk about more spending Bitcoin and bringing it into the economy. That's basically my core belief. Yeah. And now let's get to the treasuries, and also why I am like heavily invested in these, because at the end of the day, what they are doing is they are arbitraging the current fiat system. So as you rightly said, the basic idea is, okay, you take a loan denominated in fiat, and then you take this money and buy Bitcoin with it. And then the idea is that Bitcoin rises faster in price, than the interest you have to pay on the loan. So let's just say you get a loan for 7% interest, and Bitcoin rises in price on average 20 to 30% per year. Then like the difference is your gain, right? So if Bitcoin rises by 20%, but you only pay 7% in interest, you make a 13% gain, which makes sense and is actually a great thing to do. So I could do this as a private person, because I, as a private person, could take out a consumer loan for, let's just say, 7, 8, 9, or even 10%, right? And I could buy Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin rises by 20 or 30%. Yeah, and as I said, I pocket the difference. So in theory, I could already do that without needing treasury companies. But the idea why private investors like myself, give money to Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy is that, at least in theory, he should be able to access debt cheaper with his public company than I can do it as a private person. So if I, as a private person, access debt at 7%, Saylor should be able to exit it at 1%, 2%, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So as he is able to get cheaper debt, the return is obviously also higher, because let's just say Bitcoin, as I said, increases by 20% per year, but you only pay 1% in interest, you pocket 19%, right? But if I raise the debt at 7%, I only pocket 13%, right? So this is why, in theory, his company should trade at a premium, okay? So like his company is not valued 1-to-1 to his Bitcoin holdings, but let's just say 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, right? So if you add up all of the value of the shares, basically they are 3 times as much worth as the Bitcoin. Yeah, and there you also get more or less already what I have in my head as the big risk factor. It's called MNAV compression. So at first, what's the MNAV? MNAV is modified net asset value. What's the net asset value? Net asset value is basically how much the Bitcoins are valued on his balance sheet. Let's just say he buys Bitcoin for $10 billion, but his company is valued at $20 billion. Then basically the MNAV is 2. So this 10 billion in Bitcoin times 2 equals the 20 billion. And this MNAV is not determined by Saylor. It's not determined by anybody. Yeah, it's just determined by the market. So the market tries to value like the Bitcoin treasury. And then the basic idea of Saylor, what I think is genius, is he convinced people that he not only deserves a premium for the ability to raise cheap debt, but he also deserves a premium for basically enabling pension funds around the world or other big investors to access Bitcoin. Because before MicroStrategy, these pension funds, they were restricted by law that they cannot buy Bitcoin directly. However, they can buy Bitcoin, or they are allowed to buy the stock of a company, right? So as MicroStrategy is issuing shares, the pension funds are allowed by law to buy the shares, right? But all of the value in MicroStrategy is basically Bitcoin only. So MicroStrategy is more or less a proxy, for Bitcoin. So these pension funds, they basically say, oh, look, I'm restricted by law. I cannot buy Bitcoin directly. However, I see these growth rates, of 10, 20, 30%. However, like I cannot access this because the law forbids it. But the law does not forbid me to buy shares in a company. So instead of buying Bitcoin directly, they buy Bitcoin indirectly via MicroStrategy, right? So this is the value he provides to the market. However, this value does not occur in all of the markets globally, only in the markets where pension funds are forbidden to buy Bitcoin, for instance, in the UK. However, in Switzerland, for instance, they can buy ETPs, so exchange traded products. So there, like the pension funds are just able to buy Bitcoin directly. However, in the US, again, like in the UK, they are forbidden. That's why they have like such a big interest in MicroStrategy. So this, let's just say, as the baseline, So the baseline is more or less the idea of these treasuries is twofold. Number one, I have access to cheap public debt. This debt is cheaper than private people can raise. That's why like private investors give them money. So like retail investors and the professional investors give them money because they see the shares of MicroStrategy as a proxy for Bitcoin. Before I get into much more detail, I think I pause here for a second and give you the ability to like ask any questions or tell me in which direction I should take it.
I mean, just one or maybe two comments. I like when you said at the beginning that we have to spend Bitcoin, because that's always that annoys me a tiny bit with Michael Saylor, that he's like, I will buy Bitcoin, and if I die, I will take all my Bitcoins into my grave. I'm like, well, then you probably always bought Bitcoin but never used them, as we should. That's always one thing that I disliked about what he does. And also, a second question. Do you think then that when he buys his Bitcoin, does he buy a Bitcoin OTC or does he buy it directly, from the market? Because that's always a thing, because I know that you can buy Bitcoin, for example, also OTC, So
I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I don't know. That's the honest answer. However, personally, I do not think that he's buying Bitcoin on the open market. So he's not like logging into like Kraken or Coinbase exchange and just buys like 100 millions of Bitcoin there. So I think these transactions, they are arranged OTC, but also with Bitcoin OGs. So, for instance, just one thing I have in my head, and I studied finance, so more or less, if I have it in my head, certainly other people also have it in their head. So, what is happening is that he, as you probably know, he is not publishing his holdings, right? So he basically says, "Oh, look, I will not verify my holdings on the blockchain because of security issues. Yeah, like it's too dangerous. People could try to hack us, and so on and so on." Personally, I think it's complete and utter bullshit. Yeah. What I think what's happening is that he actually is buying the Bitcoin directly from like big whales, yeah, people who have thousands of bitcoins. I mean, like as I said, like whatever Adam Back and so on and so on. These people who have a ton of Bitcoin, and that then in exchange, yeah, for the Bitcoin, these people they get a discounted they can buy discounted shares in his company, and then maybe also
Wow.
with a promise hey, I can buy the Bitcoin back later on. Yeah, so we do not. And this is also a risk, like one of the risks of the treasuries, especially when it comes to MicroStrategy and Saylor. We do not know, yeah, whether the Bitcoins Saylor holds are 100% the Bitcoins of MicroStrategy, yeah, or whether he only like loans the Bitcoins, yeah, because you can actually also like not buy a financial asset, but you can pay a fee in order to loan the financial asset, yeah,
Yeah.
and we don't know, yeah, we don't know as long as he is not proving his stack, yeah, on the blockchain. And if you are, let's just say, Dr. Doom, yeah, you basically say, look, like I have no capability to verify whether MicroStrategy really owns these bitcoins or whether those bitcoins are only loaned, right?
Yeah.
So this is like one of the risks, and as you said, I think this whole like propaganda slash marketing of Saylor. Bitcoin is digital gold. Don't spend it, and so on and so on. I personally think Saylor knows exactly how this ends. I think we can talk about it at length a little bit later on. But Saylor knows his only risk, yeah, or like let's just say not the only risk, but like the biggest risk he runs, yeah, is that at one point the government classifies him as a financial company, as a bank, yeah, and then he gets a different set of regulation, yeah. So he tries to appease lawmakers, he tries to appease regulators, yeah, and more or less just says exactly what they want to hear. Because if he's out there and be like, oh, Bitcoin is the new global currency, fuck the dollar, and so on and so on. So if he would be like really like a rebel, yeah, and not working with the system but against the system, yeah, he would draw much more attention, or like let's just say unwanted attention. Yeah, he doesn't like this. That's the reason why he at the one point understands like our financial system perfectly. He understands how he can like make a profit and arbitrage everything, but he also knows that his biggest risk is actually the government. So he also like works with the government. So it's a really like a convoluted situation there.
It's like a hate, yeah, like a hate and love story. You know, like you hate the guys, but at
Yeah,
the same time, you have to love them. You have to kiss their asses. You know, otherwise
correct.
you'll be gone. You know. Okay, interesting. So, in a sense, do you then think that maybe I don't, maybe that's the wrong word, but that he plays the guru in a sense in the Bitcoin space, because that always is for me like the case. Whenever I hear like talks, it's always about him. It's never about, you know, like when I was in Prague, every panel, you know, like Mike Eser does, like MicroStrategy does, like he does. I'm like, can you guys not just think of another person? Why does it always have to be Saylor? For me, whenever I watch like a speech when Saylor is on like stage, like
Yeah,
everyone storms the freaking like building and like the you know
yeah,
the room, and
yeah,
after he's gone, everyone else is gone. You know, it's like he's like kind of like Satoshi 2.0, though. You know,
yeah,
you know what?
yeah,
For me, that's always interesting. So, do you think, in a sense, that he might be also like a guru, and that
yeah,
Bitcoin maybe also need a person like him? So, because otherwise,
yeah.
well, you know,
Um,
what would we do? You know, so
Yeah. Personally, I think he has obviously like a big ego, right? So he's really
oh
like
yeah,
ego driven. And I think that his goal, yeah, is just before he dies. I mean, before he dies, you think he's 60 or something, yeah. But I think it
yeah,
will still take 10, 20 years, maybe 10 years until MicroStrategy is the biggest company in the world. Yeah. So I really like from like the depths of my heart, no financial advice. Yeah. But I really think that MicroStrategy will be at one point be the biggest company on planet Earth. Yeah. and I will also explain why in a little bit. And I think that Saylor just want to have this title. Yeah, Saylor is obviously he is in this. Yeah, for also for Bitcoin. Yeah, but as you just said, he now has like this god status more or less. Yeah,
Yeah.
people basically appease him, people love him, and so on and so on. And you always have to remember the guy. That's why I think everything is super solid. He was a billionaire before this. Yeah. So sure, his company was only worth 500 million, but he is in business for like whatever, 30 years, 35 years even, right? So he basically also bets his personal net worth on this, and he more or less has everything you ever can dream of, right? So
Yeah.
for him, the only thing left, yeah, to chase is more or less status and fame within society. So on the monetary side, yeah, he's basically set. So he's not in this for the money. I totally believe him when he says he is basically in it for different reasons. But I don't buy it that he is actually in it for Bitcoin, because he's not. Yeah, he's more in it for personal gain, but not in terms of money, but in terms of status. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm pretty sure that he already knows how everything ends. Because for me, like I was thinking a long time about before investing, um, what's the end game? Yeah, like what's actually happening here? Because currently, I think Nvidia is the biggest company at 4 trillion. MicroStrategy is at 100 billion. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it still has to 40x until it takes over Nvidia. And more or less, if you are like a top whatever, like right now, if you are a top 500 company, nobody's talking about you. Yeah, like there's too much attention on like everything else. However, if you are the biggest company on planet Earth, then people will start to basically talk about you. I mean, it's insane, but most people have not heard about Nvidia before it was worth 1 trillion. Yeah, like it's completely crazy, because they got a
Exactly.
1 trillion valuation without anybody talking about it. Yeah, and currently the same thing is happening with MicroStrategy. Yeah, like nobody's talking about it. However, I posted this yesterday, and I think it's true. Um, People who call MicroStrategy a Ponzi scheme, they do not understand that fiat obviously is also a Ponzi scheme. Yeah,
Of
and
course.
and MicroStrategy is basically just a mirror of another Ponzi. So yes, it is a Ponzi. However, it mirrors another Ponzi. And basically, as long as the idea is quite simple. Yeah, as long as governments print money, yeah, as Bitcoin will rise in price. Yeah, and when
Yeah.
Bitcoin will rise in price, MicroStrategy survives. And only if governments would stop to print money, yeah, only then um, he would get a problem. Yeah, but without that, he will not get a problem. And basically, to say MicroStrategy will fail is basically saying governments will stop printing money, and that's just not going to happen. Yeah, so
No.
but we will reach the point over the next couple of years, decades, I don't know, where the money printing will get, as you know, like since COVID, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more insane, to plug all of the holes. And basically, MicroStrategy in tandem, yeah, will increase in value because Bitcoin will increase in value. Yeah. And I think that Saylor already knows. Okay, and that's why he's always with like a big smirk and so on and so on. And I personally truly think he's right about that. That at one point it just will be the biggest company. It's just math. It's not like, oh, this could happen or it can't happen. Yeah, but for me
It's
it's
mad.
just
Yeah.
like, yeah, but for me it's just like governments will print, Bitcoin will rise in price. He has the biggest balance sheet when it comes to Bitcoin. So at one point, because think of gold. Yeah, gold is currently at 25 trillion. Nvidia is at 4 trillion. Yeah, and personally, I think Bitcoin will catch up faster to gold. Yeah, then Nvidia will reach 25 trillion. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so 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 at one point he more or less will be the biggest company. But then he basically will probably ask himself the same question I ask myself: what then? Yeah. Because then basically he is in the limelight, and more or less because think about it, the whole world talks about the biggest company on planet Earth, and then people will just stand there and be like, "What the fuck is happening? Why, huh?"
Yeah.
And so on. And then the whole like financial system will be really forced to get into Bitcoin. But the problem now is for governments, this can't happen, because if this happens, yeah, the system will crumble, because then like the message we Bitcoiner try to convey will get out, and also like normal people will get out. because you cannot have a retirement portfolio without the biggest company on the earth. Yeah, so every retirement portfolio on planet Earth will hold MicroStrategy, and then like the whole world will wake up and be like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. And then either two things can happen. As I said, number one, it just gets labeled as a bank. It will just get outlawed more or less, as the government did in the past. Whenever there was something which could threaten the government, yeah, gold standard, whatever, yeah. Whenever there was something, the government banned it or outlawed it. Yeah. So this is basically my base case, that the government will just outlaw Bitcoin as a treasury asset. That's the only thing how you can basically kill MicroStrategy. But then the big problem is, and this is what Saylor is doing really great, and that's also why he's doing so much marketing, because I think he is at the point, yeah, where like new money, like where his company is so big, like retail investors, like you and me, yeah, like even if we would invest millions, yeah, for him it's like nothing. So he really needs the big money. But he is still going to all of these Bitcoin events, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, why the fuck is he doing that? And because for him, more or less, it's like lost time, right? But so I was thinking about this, and my conclusion is more or less his goal, yeah, is still that many like private people invest in his company directly instead of Bitcoin. Why? Because let's just say he has like 50 million individual investors, and then the government would say, "Oh, I outlaw MicroStrategy." Then 50 million people would turn up and be like, "Fuck you, no, like you cannot do this." Yeah. So he tries basically to build a shareholder army for the point when the government will try to outlaw it, that the people will basically fight against the government. Yeah. So he already knows this, and this is why he still goes to all of these Bitcoin events to convince individual investors, because more or less the bigger his like fan base, or the bigger his like army of individual investors, the harder it is for the government to outlaw him. Yeah. So this is the one thing which could happen. Well, I mean, this is more or less my base case. Yeah. But I personally, I just think we live in a super interesting time, because I don't know what's happened then. Because you get to a point where he will where he will get to be the biggest company, and at the same time he cannot really be outlawed, because he will have this army of private investors. But on the other hand, the government cannot allow this to go on, because then the whole like fiat system crumbles. Or maybe, yeah, they already know that the system is fucked anyways, yeah, so they just let it happen. I don't know that, right? Yeah, these are like the two scenarios I see. But this is how I like try to think through everything, yeah, to really understand his motivation, more or less, like for why he's doing the why he's doing things the way he does it, more or less.
Well, you could then also say that if he has enough followers in his company, maybe also his shares go up. Maybe also that's like a goal of his, that he can also pump his shares up, which most of the guys I assume. But for me, it's always interesting. I had this, I'm not sure when it was exactly, conversation like in Prague, I think, with a guy, which he was also critical about Michael Saylor, what he does. And he said at me at one point, for me, it seems like his company sometimes acts like a shitcoin. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, he goes like to these, people like politicians. He comes to conferences and promotes strategy B. And what do people do then most of the times? Or what you did, you buy shares from strategy B, or MicroStrategy as it was known back then. And I was like, okay, yeah, but does that make him a shitcoin? He's like, yeah, well, he pushes his product, so people buy it and it goes up the price. And I was really thinking about it. Is that true? Is his company kind of like a shitcoin? And when you think of that, you're like, wait a minute, hold on. And so for me, it was like really funny to talk to this dude. And at the end, we were like, fucking hell, what's gonna happen if he's like the biggest guy, or will people then think of him like a second, shitcoin thing, like Tether, or although I don't think that Tether actually is a shitcoin, it's rather a stellar coin for me, but still, it was really interesting, that discussion. And my question now to you is, in a sense, is he a shitcoin, or his company, is it a shitcoin, in a sense, or what are your thoughts on that, because that just popped out in my head.
Yeah. So let me clarify that. So I think we established earlier that from a fundamental perspective, yeah,
Yep.
The value driver of MicroStrategy is cheap access to public debt. Yeah? Because again, as a public company, you can raise debt cheaper than a private individual because obviously you also have more collateral to take a loan out against. All right, so this is also how MicroStrategy made their first gains between 221 until the big run in 224. They issued convertible bonds. Yeah? A convertible bond is a financial instrument, as it is in the name, which is more or less debt at first, but later it gets converted into equity. Yeah? But more or less, it's a debt instrument, or in different words, it's just a loan. Yeah? And then in the first years, he did not use the equity side of his balance sheet. So as most people know, a business has a debt side of the balance sheet and the equity side. They both have to match. And you can basically increase the enterprise value. So the enterprise value is the equity and the debt together. You can increase this by either using the equity side. And on the equity side, you issue shares, and people buy these shares. When these shares increase in price, you also increase your valuation, or you can increase the valuation by taking on more debt. And as I said, the fundamental value comes from the debt side of the balance sheet. And now, like, a super interesting thing happened. And this is where everything gets a little bit crazy, and it's not that easy to wrap your head around that. And it's also more, I would say, for people with a financial education. So if your listeners don't get it right away, don't think you're stupid. It's just it's you have to understand finance to understand the value more or less. What happens? And this is also where I'm critical and where I basically try to convince people on X a little bit. Hey, let's discuss this. He came up with all of these KPIs, right? So Bitcoin per share. If we increase Bitcoin per share, MicroStrategy should be worth more, or we are more or less in the on the right track, more or less, because you as a shareholder, whenever we buy Bitcoin, right, you have more Bitcoins per share you have. So this is a good thing. And basically what I'm saying is, hold on. Like, you people, all of you, because when you go to the website of MicroStrategy, you will see a lot of KPIs. Bitcoin gain per share, as I said, like Bitcoin per share, and so on and so on. Bitcoin talk. Think of it like the guy, Michael Saylor, invented the KPIs. He basically wants the market to judge him upon himself. This is akin to, you go to a high school class, and you basically tell the students, hey, I have a really great idea. You write a test, and afterwards you grade the test yourself. And it's like, obviously, everybody puts in, what do I have? A plus plus plus. Yeah, great. And for me, it's like, how stupid is the market, and how stupid are investors in general to basically believe the KPIs Saylor published himself. I mean, how fucking stupid is this? So it's like, hey, let me judge you on the numbers and ideas. You basically invented yourself. I mean, what will he do? Will he basically provide KPIs and numbers to judge him, which are bad for him? Yeah, obviously not. And for me, it's just like how stupid people are in general to basically just believe this guy just like that without ever questioning that. And this is where I think, where you said before, like, where this, let's just say, salesmanship or guru attitude comes a little bit into play. And this is where I was also like super disappointed, let's just say, by the average Bitcoiner, because now the average Bitcoiner is more or less on a track. Hey, yeah, government, great. Let's pump my bags and so on and so on. Let's increase the Bitcoin price. Let's root for Saylor. And I'm more or less one of the people, and there are not that many out there, which just say, hey, come on, let's take a step back. Let's think through this. So let me explain this Bitcoin per share thing, because something really, really interesting is happening. And I think, like, we can discuss hours and hours, but this is really the core issue of everything, where I personally think people have to understand. So what's happening? As I said before, due to the cheaper access to debt, MicroStrategy is valued higher than all of the Bitcoins together they have. So I'm just using round numbers because it's easier for math. So let's just say he bought 10 billion in Bitcoin, but now his company is valued at 2 billion, at 20 billion Bitcoin. So then basically his MNAV is 2. But now, here comes the interesting thing. if the MNAV is 2, he can issue new shares. So he can issue new shares into the market. Yeah. So instead of, let's just say 1 million shares, now he has like 1,100,000 shares.
Mhm.
And then the market has more shares to trade. And with the money, so this is called at the market equity issuance. So with the new money he basically gets from the emittance of the shares, he buys even more Bitcoin. Yeah. And then mathematically, an interesting thing happens. Mathematically, there are more shares out there. However, the Bitcoin per share, the Bitcoin per share increases.
Okay.
But now something funny happens. This argument becomes like a loop. Yeah, it's like a circle. So the argument is not more or less, because before the argument was my MNAV is basically above 1 because I can access debt cheaper. Yeah. So again, the fundamental value is access to cheap debt. Yeah. But now the argument becomes, I will find more people to buy my equity. So in that sense, it's like a shitcoin, because how does a shitcoin basically increase in value? It only increases in value if you find another person who buys it at a higher price than the other person. And now MicroStrategy over the past 9 months, they are more or less doing the same. So they are hyping up the stock because they need to. So in order to use the equity side of their balance sheet, they need new investors. They need new investors who buy the share at a higher price than the investors before that. And people don't get this. So people in general judge Saylor on this metric Bitcoin per share, but don't understand that this argument is like a loop. So I always make an comparison, which is maybe easier to understand, because I think I can say this with Bitcoin per share now. Maybe if you are interested in this, maybe either go to my Twitter profile. There I write about it extensively, or just look up Bitcoin per share on the MicroStrategy website, where they explain what they actually do. But let's just make an easy example why this argument he's doing is wrong. So I love the example of academic citations. Yeah, let's just say I put a paper out there. Yeah, and this paper is actually absolute garbage. Yeah. With all of the woke madness in the past 5 to 10 years, you basically say, look, they are not 2 genders, but they are like 10 genders. And because it's like, and no, but because it's because it's like trendy to say that there are like 10 genders and not 2 genders, and I publish an academic paper out of there, other people cite my paper. Yeah, so other people basically refer to my paper as the truth. And then the argument becomes recursive, because then people say, oh, look, there are more than 2 genders. And this paper has so many citations, it must be true. So I also cite this paper. Yeah. So this paper gets another citation. And then like 2 years later, the next researcher basically starts his research and is like, okay, let me look up papers on gender studies. And then he says this paper, oh, look, it has 1 million citations and it says there are 10 genders. Okay, yeah, so this must be like a base truth. But no, like the base truth is wrong, because there are only 2 genders. And with MicroStrategy, it's the same. Like access to cheap debt, is the value driver, or the fundamental value driver for these companies. It's not selling their shares like a shitcoin, as you said, And but people now accept this as like core truth. So people have like the shitcoinery in their head. Oh, like Michael. So he can create shares out of nothing, get hard dollars for it, and with these dollars can buy Bitcoin. And then the next person says, oh, the value is not anymore the access to cheap debt, but it's the ability to share to issue shares to buy more Bitcoin. And then as with the citations, this argument becomes just like a fucking loop, where people are basically saying nothing else than, look, in the future there will be other people who buy the shares at a higher price, and MicroStrategy is the only company who can do that. That's why I give him my money. When people should not look at the equity side, but to the debt side. And for him, this is great. But this is also why he basically pushes this narrative so hard and is doing like the pumping of his stock, because as you said before we talked on record, you also thought that he has a lot of debt, but in reality, he has none. Yeah, not none, but like the debt to equity ratio is like super low, because think of it, when he basically uses debt to buy Bitcoin, he actually needs to like risk, right? He basically needs to risk his Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if people are stupid enough to buy his shares, I mean, he can issue shares like with a fucking wand, so he's not taking on risk. So for him to basically do the marketing to the market and be like, hey, look, let me like promote my stock. This is what he wants, because he basically wants more Bitcoin without taking on any new risk. And this is like the genius part of it, but this is also like the shitcoinery part of it. And most
Yeah.
Bitcoiners don't understand, let's just say, the financial side, because they are not like because they have not studied finance. However, most Bitcoiners like yourself, they feel in their gut something is wrong. Like I have seen this before. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why so many people on an intuitive level like understand or like reject Saylor, yeah, because they understand what he's doing is more or less shitcoinery at the moment. And yes, he is doing it, but the big difference, yeah, to all of the other fails, yeah, like BlockFi, Celsius, and so on and so on, is that Saylor, he can still go back to raise debt. And this is also what he's doing now. Yeah, he basically moved away from this equity strategy because he understood, okay, people understand what I'm doing. Yeah, and now he basically goes back to fundamentals, which is great. Yeah, but I just did a post where I said, because of the stupidity of people, yeah, he basically gets 300,000 Bitcoin for free. For me, it's like fucking crazy how people are so stupid. Because yeah, as I
Yeah.
said, like for me, the core and ground truth is just like, how the fuck can you judge a guy on numbers and metrics he invented himself? Man, it's just like so fucking stupid, and people don't get it. Yeah, and they are not able to have like a adult conversation about this. And as you
No,
said
no.
before, they just praise Sailor as like this god or whatever, and he's the greatest of all and so on. And don't get me wrong, like it's everything he does is great, but I think you can still be like critical and try to think like through everything what this actually means, more or less. Yeah.
In a sense, we're like back into the system, because what was taught in school never touched the system, never, or no, they never really taught you, but indirectly, they were
Yeah.
always trust the government, never judge the government. And
Yeah.
I have this with a lot of Bitcoin. I believe a lot of Bitcoiners are fucking commies. Sorry for saying like that, but
Yeah.
to all of the Bitcoiners, sometimes you're fucking commies. You know,
Yeah.
and when I talk to Bitcoin, oh, Bitcoin will go up to like 1 million in the next 2 years, or we should only have Bitcoin as the only true standard. I'm like, well, that's also not great. Just having Bitcoin, we have a free market.
Yeah.
Capitalism is literally free marketism.
Yeah.
We need a free market. We need opportunities to get rich in a sense, or to be
Yeah.
free financially. And it just really explodes my mind to see how many Bitcoiners are like, MicroStrategy is the best dude, Bitcoin only, because, well, they're also blinded by his, rich and famousness, because he's
Yeah.
rich and famous because of Bitcoin, right? Or
Yeah.
in a sense, and a lot of people think like, oh yeah, I want that too. So, and the weirdest thing I have with people, I know people which took credits, which took loans to buy more Bitcoin, you know,
Yeah.
and not Lombard loans, consumer loans, and
Yeah.
I'm like, well, in a sense, okay, if the price goes up, you can pay that back. But what if the price drops? What if World War Three happens like from day one to day 10, and the price drops, which we're currently like close to it, World War Three, although I'm not sure if it's gonna happen, or I don't think so it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But there you go, what then?
Yeah.
And what if Michael Sagan one day has to sell some Bitcoin because, let's say, financial crash, World War Three, or something's going on in the world where markets crash? I mean, I'm not sure if his stocks will always go up. They also have to crash at some point. So
Yeah.
that's always, that's like a line with a lot of questions. But
Yeah. Sure. 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 I mean, I can only say like, so, as I sound like super critical of everything. Yeah. But it's I try to explain to people just more or less what's going on. Yeah, because I'm like, as a Bitcoiner, I'm super interested in the truth. Okay,
yeah,
like this is a value which matters to me a lot, and it's really interesting because when you think about Bitcoin, yeah, this is also like the first chapter of my book is the
hmm
same as in Mises's human action, is basically, where does knowledge originate from, right? So how do we know the things to be true? Yeah? And basically, like our whole academic system, right, is built on empiricism. Yeah? You have to observe something and make a academic experiment in order to prove it to be right. But there are things in the world, yeah, which are true without observation. For instance, mathematics, yeah, two plus four, 2 plus 2 equals 4. You don't need to observe this, yeah, like you just know it to be true, yeah. And this side of knowledge is called rationalism, yeah. So you rationally think through a problem. And when it comes to Bitcoin, yeah, all of the Bitcoiners, they are more or less rationalists, yeah, because obviously they do not have or like they haven't observed Bitcoin as money, yeah. However, they think through it, yeah, like what are the properties of Bitcoin, yeah. Okay, these properties make it better money than gold and make it better money than a dollar. That's why I save my money in Bitcoin, yeah. So they basically approach everything from a logical side, yeah. And when it comes to Bitcoin treasuries and especially MicroStrategy, um, these people have a cognitive dissonance, yeah, because the Bitcoin they value rationally because they understand they have value, and you only understand this if you think logically, yeah. But
Yep.
then when it comes to MicroStrategy and when it comes to Saylor, when they would think logically, yeah, they would, like myself, understand the value, the fundamental value comes from the access to cheap debt, yeah. So they would demand, okay, Saylor, don't show me KPIs on the equity side of the balance sheet, but show me the KPIs on the debt side of the balance sheet, because that's the rational and the logical thing to do. But then what Saylor like made sure of with his own KPIs, that they judge him on the equity side, and then the equity side gets proven empirically. So empirically, like a shitcoin, yeah, like the cycle. Oh, shitcoin goes up, yeah. So more people are interested in shitcoin. I
Mhm.
anticipate that more people are interested in shitcoin. So I buy more shitcoin. The next person says again, I buy more, I buy more, I buy more, but it has zero fundamental value. Yeah. So for me, the people who say Bitcoin per share makes sense, it's completely stupid because it says, okay, like you in your head, you say, I value Bitcoin rationally, but I value MicroStrategy empirically. And I'm like, what is it? Like, do you have like two people living in your head? Like, are you like retarded? Yeah. So like, it's either
Are you
or.
calling?
Yeah. Sorry. Like, yeah, correct. I mean, it's like it's either or. Yeah. You're either male or female. Yeah. You're not both. So it's just like for me, it's crazy how people tell like themselves the stories they want to hear or they want to believe, yeah, which fit into their own narrative, yeah. Like I don't know how many people are out there, but there are probably like millions of people out there who have some money invested in Bitcoin, but it's not enough, more or less, that they can retire from that job or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
And so they are basically rooting for everything which increases the price of Bitcoin without even thinking like what this actually implies, more or less. Yeah. And this is what I criticize. Yeah. Because again, like I'm in camp Bitcoin, I'm also in camp Michael Saylor, because I think like from a finance perspective, it's really really smart what he's doing. Yeah, but I think we should be able to say, look, you know, like I respect you. I think it's smart what you're doing. Yeah, I root for you, but at the same time, I'm able to criticize you. Yeah. And for
Yeah.
people, like everything is so heightened. Yeah, they are like, okay, look, if you say anything against Sailor, you are fudster. Yeah, you are like a crazy person and so on. It's just like, no, you know, I'm just a fucking adult. That's the difference. So yeah, it's super interesting how people can have these different thoughts in their mind, but they are not like rigorous when it comes to thinking, but they are just like painting every situation in a light which basically fits their own narrative without thinking about it.
It's also interesting. I don't get how people can now still trust the state, because listen, what states do with Bitcoin strategic reserve, like the US does, that's great, right? But still,
Yeah,
it's then a government buying Bitcoin, which probably, and I assume the government probably thinks that if they buy as much as Bitcoin as possible, they control like Bitcoin, which I don't think is possible. No one controls it.
yeah,
And it's the same like that, going back to a old thinking, which is not good.
yeah,
When you think of it, even if you try to explain it to people, people will still judge you and won't listen to you unless they get hurt. It's like
yeah,
what happened after, I would say, no, I would say before 28, 29. when we had the financial crisis, people were like, "Oh, nothing's gonna happen." After 2009, look what happened. People lost their houses, people lost their jobs, and they got hurt, and they realized that they were fucked from the back. By the way, I just want to say something. You're so fucking based. I like that. Like the thing with the two genders thing, so based, dude. But it's also the same with that. But yeah, it's just crazy what we live in. But yeah, I would like to get to one more thing before we're gonna end this episode. You wrote a book, as you mentioned before briefly. Would you like to quickly explain what it is about? And how you even had the idea to write your own book, because that's always interesting for people to hear. So
sure. So basically, the idea of my book is more or less to provide, let's just say, a guide, to Bitcoin, but a guide not only from a monetary perspective, but basically all of the most important books together in one book. Why did I do it? Because I'm a big fan of history, and there's this famous historian couple. It's called they're called the Durans, and they basically wrote, I think, in total 25 books about the whole history of civilization. Like 10,000 years of human history. And then afterwards, they basically summarized everything in one book. It's called Lessons of History. That only has 100 pages. And when you read these 100 pages, it's more or less general knowledge about us as human beings. It's like human beings and war, human beings and religion. And then you really understand, okay, civilizations and society is built like everything else on cycles, and cycles repeat. Like never 100%, but more or less, we as human beings, or like human nature in general, hasn't changed. Like we are still the same. And I wanted to provide more or less a guide into Bitcoin, and also how I like see the world in many ways, on 100 pages, where you don't have to read more or less like, okay, first the standard economic textbooks, then the Austrian economics, then Hayek, then Mises, Rothbard, then all of the anarcho-capitalism stuff, then statism, Hoppe, and so on. I mean, like, I think to get a really profound understanding of what's going on with Bitcoin, I really think you have to read these 50, 60, 70 books. You really have to have deep knowledge about many things to really understand why Bitcoin has value, and also how Bitcoin fits into the bigger picture of humanity, of money, and so on and so on. And this is also the only way how you can get like deep conviction into the asset. And most people, like, they don't come home and be like, look, like, now I'm gonna like read these 70 books over the next 2 years. So I just wanted something where people like have like 100 pages and have the most important ideas about money, statism, and Bitcoin. So more or less, it's only a couple of chapters, I think 8 or 9 chapters. But the basic idea is, first we talk about, as I said before, like, where does knowledge originate? So how do we know that things are true? Because it's for me, this is like the base layer of everything. Because like, you get all of this fiat propaganda, and then you have other people talking about this Bitcoin thing. And for me, I'm always like, okay, how can we make sure that people actually trust us? Because obviously, if you're not into it, you sound like a crazy person.
yeah,
So for me, it was really important, before we talk about anything, that we basically talk about, okay, let's talk about knowledge itself. So that's the first chapter, the origin of knowledge. Then we talk about monetary metals. So basically, what makes good money? I mean, all of the things. That it's divisible, that it's rare, and so on and so on. Then afterwards, we talk about how states captured money. And nowadays, states use like the ability to print money, or in other words, inflation, to basically finance themselves. But really to understand, okay, if money is provided by the free market, how the hell is money married to the government nowadays? Because it's also super interesting to know. And then afterwards, we basically paint the state more or less as a bad actor, that which it is. And then we basically ask the question. So I asked the question, okay, if states are bad, why the fuck do we need why do we need that, right? So what's
Yeah.
basically the basic idea how states developed, and then we get all into this Hoppe stuff. Yeah, that first we had like aristocracy, then we had kings, and then we had democracy, and then we just like really think through, okay, what does it actually mean to have democracy, correct? But
Democracy.
we
Yeah.
but basically I think through, okay, like what are the benefits of each system, and then more or less you actually you really understand, hey, democracy is actually not that great. What you actually want to have is like free market, yeah, like also there, which is more like I call it natural, natural government, more or less. But I mean, you have to read the book about it. But just let me paint a big picture. And then basically, okay, afterwards, I introduced the question. Okay, we have states, but how would the world look like um, uh, if there were no states? Yeah, so if we would live in anarchy, yeah, so basically if
Yeah.
the market ruled, more or less, yeah, so if it's like a rules based system enforced by the market, yeah, can we actually do this? Yeah, so obviously probably it won't happen because states already developed, yeah, but it's just an interesting thought exercise. And then afterwards, I basically introduce Bitcoin, and then I basically go through all of the basic Bitcoin questions. Yeah, what is Bitcoin? Can Bitcoin be prevented? Why has it value? And how I basically think the whole story unfolds, more or less. Yeah. And then you have like this whole thread where you are basically like, okay, where does knowledge come from? What is money? Why does the state has the ability to print money? Why do we need states? How would a world like without states? What is Bitcoin, and how does it fit into the big picture? Because like all of these things, yeah, they are
Mhm.
like an individual book. And what I miss is like one book which is like a thread through everything, where people are like, okay, this is how everything fits together. Because what I realized when I told people about Bitcoin, they like read one book, but after the one book, they don't get it, which is natural because you have to read many books, right?
Yeah.
And they miss the big picture. But for me, it's really important that people have a book which is like quick, fast, and also the big picture. Because all of the safety in books, they're like 500-600 pages. And it's too long for most people. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted to have like it's quite dense. Uh, That's true. Yeah. But I think you can read it in 1 or 2 days, and then you understand really, okay, like I don't have to spend a month, yeah, studying this, but more or less a week. Yeah. And yeah, more or less I did it because I wanted to contribute. Yeah. And I think you can contribute in two ways: spread the word. But the problem is when you spread the word too much, yeah, then people think you are crazy, especially your friends and family. So
Yeah.
so the best thing is just to provide resources, because if we all provide resources, what you are also doing, what we are doing right now, right? I think there's like this famous Bitcoin statement, like everybody discovers Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Yeah, like we understood it earlier. Other people will only understand it in 10 years, but when they are ready, they need resources, right? So I
Yeah.
thought, okay, like for me, there are like two ways to contribute. First, provide resources. Second, talk about it publicly, best case. And third, my own spending power, my own companies. I save my money in Bitcoin. And if everybody was doing that, within 5 years, most problems on planet Earth would be fucking resolved.
Cool. So okay, one more question though, because I have to ask you
Yeah,
that. Do you then think that, what you just mentioned with anarchy, because I'm not a big
yeah,
fan of anarchy, because look
yeah,
at France, for example. They had anarchy, Napoleon Bonaparte came.
yeah,
Germany had also some sort of anarchy after World War II, then Adolf Hitler came. Russia the same with Stalin, right? So
yeah,
do you then think that with Bitcoin, we have a tool, because I like to call it a peaceful revolution for some reason. I don't know where I actually get this from. I think I got it from my mom, because she sometimes calls it that.
yeah,
It is a peaceful revolution. And do you think with Bitcoin, we have something now which we can fight back in a sense? I'm not like fighting like physically, but,
yeah,
financially, spiritually, mentally,
yeah,
And with that, also people wake up. And
yeah,
do you also then think that Bitcoin might, I don't think it will replace fiat, but it will
yeah,
be at the same height as gold and fiat, for example. Because if it would replace fiat, let's be honest, the world would end in chaos. I mean, the banks would probably end, and which I don't
yeah,
think the banks will ever
yeah,
end, especially like with Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Vanguards,
yeah, yeah,
Fidelity, BlackRock, all these guys, the big guys, JP Morgan, and also, the Fed. I actually never think that the Fed will end.
yeah.
We might get closer, but that's a different topic. So yeah, thoughts on that, so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super interesting question, and so anarchy won't happen, but it won't happen not because it's not possible. It won't happen because of human nature, yeah. Because
Yeah.
we humans, and this is also a post of mine. I was thinking through this because obviously this is a question every Bitcoiner should ask themselves. Like, how does it all end? Yeah, and if you cannot answer this, you haven't thought like hard about everything. And I think what I like about you, what you just said, is you're also like a realist, yeah, because you have these Bitcoiners who are completely crazy, who are like, hey, there won't be any states left, and so on and so on, and this complete utopia, but not because it's not possible. Theory, like if you just have the raw theory, it's possible, but the big issue is emotions, yeah, because
Yeah.
for instance, let's just say you have this cold winter night, yeah, and you just freeze to death, yeah, and then you see these like people living in a house, and you go to their door and you're like, hey, shit, like I was hiking in the mountains, but I forgot to get a hotel or a place to sleep. Can I stay with you? Yeah, but you do this in like a non-civilized society, and like a woman opens the door and then the woman is like, oh no, you're like this big 2 meter dude with your friend, I'm scared of
Yeah.
you, no, sorry, you cannot sleep here. She closes the door. Okay, in like a non-civilized society, what will the dudes do? Will they be like, oh yeah, sure, like let's just freeze to death, like no problem, yeah? So obviously they will violate the property rights of the woman and basically just enter the house and be just like, fuck you, like we are sleeping here whether you want it or not. Obviously, in theory, the woman is in the right because it's her property, yeah, but
Mhm.
like human emotion, yeah, like will overcome like rational thinking and be like, okay, look, if I'm like not violating her property rights, I will freeze to death. So obviously I'm doing it, right? And this is just human nature. As human nature persists, you have to think about money not only in a technical sense. And this is the big fault many Bitcoiners make.
Mhm.
Bitcoiners only think money emotionless. Yeah, they think money logically, and logically, Bitcoin is the better money. Yeah, so it makes total sense. But the problem is humans are 50% logic and 50% emotion. Because if you do not have fiat, imagine, yeah, like you have a crisis. COVID was fabricated, okay, but imagine there was like a real crisis, yeah, which is not fabricated, and governments, they have to react to this, and governments can only react by printing money and then acting with this money. And on a Bitcoin standard, there is not, or like there is no flexibility in the system, and then governments are not able to react to the demands of people, okay,
Mhm.
and the demands of people are basically the emotion of the people. Yeah, people are scared, for instance. Yeah, people are scared, or people want something, and if the
Yeah.
government cannot give it to them, you have violence. Yeah, in theory, people would not get violent because people understand property rights, right? But this is not how like normal people think. Yeah, people are like short term and are like, I want something now, right? And because human nature is like this, yeah, that human nature always makes the mistake, yeah, of exchanging something in the long term for something short term. It's like this typical thing. Hey, do you want like one marshmallow now or three in an hour? That most children say, I want a marshmallow now, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so as long as human nature is based on short termism, that long fiat will survive. And human nature hasn't changed in 10,000 years, and human nature won't change because we are always the same. And that's why
Yeah.
fiat will always persist. This is what I came that's the conclusion what I made. The only difference now is, and I think you also have to come to peace with this conclusion. You will be just a digital aristocrat. So I basically made my peace. Yeah, like I cannot save everybody. I can do these podcasts. I can like talk people through it, and I can help people to understand why it makes sense to save their money in Bitcoin and their purchasing power. But right now, I see myself more just like, look, I'm a digital aristocrat, and I feel like I live completely out of society. Yeah, like people discuss all of these problems, like, oh, we cannot fix this and so on. And I'm just like, just buy Bitcoin. Like that's it. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to be smart. Yeah. But people are like, no, like this guy's crazy and so on and so on. And I look at my holdings over the past 5 years, and I'm just like, sure, yeah, call me crazy, whatever. I know it works. So just like fuck you. Yeah. And I think on the one hand, like I feel very sorry for these people But on the other hand, I have absolutely no remorse. Like, I'm just like, hey, you people, you just get what the fuck you deserve. That's it. Like, and when they want to change, they can change. Yeah, there are enough resources out there. Yeah, that's it. And I think this Bitcoin quote, like, "Have fun staying poor," it's like it's very confrontational. Yeah, and it sounds very arrogant. But at the end of the day, like, this is what it boils down to. And if you cannot change the other person, then okay, that's on you. That's not on me, right? I'm doing with this, and you also do what you can do, best we can do, yeah. And then people will discover this whenever they're ready.
It's like you vote what you deserve, or you get what you deserve. Really, it's like, although I'm when it comes to politics, it's like left versus blue. There's a state against you. You know, it's always like that. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
left or right. They're both the same. You know,
Yeah.
because they both secretly know each other. They're friends. You know,
Obviously.
so. But it also, in that sense, politically, you vote what you deserve. You know, if you vote left, you vote for socialism. If you vote for right, you might vote for capitalism and conservatism and patriotism. But at the end of the day, those are also guys which like are neocons and tend you to war. You know,
Yes.
it's always fascinating. But yeah, dear Alex, thank you for joining me today. But I have one more thing that people need to know about you. Where can people find you? How can people contact you? Where can people buy your book? Are you on Twitter, as you mentioned, but also other platforms? Noster. Is your book on Amazon? Where can people buy that? And where can people find you? So
yeah. So I think the best way to contact me and also talk to me is definitely X. I'm usually checking it once a day. I'm a little bit, addicted is too much of a word, but it's just where I get most of my info from. So it's just Alex Eser, Eser. It's my last name. And if you're interested in my book, it's called Monetary Anarchy, the separation of money and state. It's available on Amazon, only in English though. But I think if people listen to this podcast, they're able to speak English. Yeah. I think it's $10. It's not much. It's just, for me, it's just again, it's just something for the people out there. I wanted to provide a book which is easy access to Bitcoin models. Yeah.
okay, cool. So dear people, thank you for joining us today. And dear Alex, thank you for joining me. That was like the most based podcast conversation I ever had. Like the way we just listed things, or the way you listed things was just like so based. You know, it's like these TikToks where you hear like based conversations and that what's that sound?
Yeah, go bam, bam, bam.
That boom sound, where it just pops it in. So yeah. But dear Alex, thank you, and dear people, thank you. And Alex, hopefully see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, Hannes. Bye bye.
Nomad Podcast.